Hi everyone, Jeff from the INTJ equation here. Thank you for joining me if you're there. Today we're going to review Gifts Differing by Isabel Myers. So I'm just going to go ahead and divide this up by chapter and everything like that. If you have any questions, you can type it here in the live chat. So I'm monitoring my Discord chat, so go ahead and leave chats there as well. So Gifts Differing was written by Isabel Myers, basically the godmother of typology, if you will. If you watch my content enough, you'll see that I'm not a big fan of MBTI. I'm definitely glad I went through and reread Gifts Differing. The preface was written by her son Peter, who wrote it after I think she died. I believe she died in the 80s somewhere, and I think it was released in 1980. So Jung originally used his typology, which he admits he didn't flesh out very thoroughly, to basically talk about and type traumatic people and see why they weren't developing properly and individuating, as he called it. Myers and her mom, Catherine Briggs, basically wanted to build an instrument to type healthy people. So they had a very different agenda there. So let's keep that in mind. Good for Isabel Myers here. She was an autodidact. She didn't have any fancy degrees or anything like that, and she typed herself as an INFP. I don't know how true that is. I think we all know that MBTI is not all that accurate. So she basically was an autodidact, like I said, and she taught herself statistics and everything else she needed to do this. And she eventually tested 5,000 med students and 10,000 nurses, along with a whole lot of other people. So very good on her to do all that. We'll go into chapter 1 here. So she talks about a lot about perceiving and judging here. I think this is what she basically used to kind of make her metrics, to make her basically her typology system, the instrument that she uses, the MBTI. She just wanted to type people how they were coming off, basically. So the introverted types are the opposite of their J and P, basically like an INTJ. They're technically, in her book, judgers, because she basically judges it off their first extroverted function, which is TE. She also doesn't talk much about the tertiary or inferior function, and definitely doesn't talk about the shadow function. So, but she does mention a shadow here, which I'll get into here in a little bit. She just basically made the perception and judgment, which was what Jung talked about, the irrational and rational functions. The irrational functions were the sensing and perceiving functions. And the rational functions are thinking and feeling. So basically, the judgment functions are the F and T, and the perceiving functions are N and S. And it does seem like during this whole book, she does have bias towards introverts in a weird way. I'm not sure why. Maybe she was reflecting on her subconscious there, her ESTJ duality side, which definitely looked like she was striving to do, as she is an INFP with all this book is just loaded with statistics and studies and stuff like that. But like pretty much she just said you can't really perceive an introvert by their first function, like an INTJ is naturally perceiver because they use introverted intuition. So you have to type them basically by their extroverted thinking, which I guess in her instance where she just wanted to type people makes sense, but I still stick to my ground that INTJs are fundamentally perceivers. All right, chapter 2. She just goes ahead and talks about what Peter reiterated in the preface, that Jung used it to type unhealthy people, and she wanted to make an instrument to type healthy people. So Jung was obviously a thinker. I think he's an INTP. A lot of people think INTJ or INFJ. I don't see INTJ at all. I don't see TE at all in his writing. And I think he's just way too informative to be an INFJ. So he definitely seems like an INTP for me. And later she talks about the goals of basically thinkers versus feelers. So he wanted to build a system to fix a problem. She wanted to build a system based off her feeling function for social harmony. She basically, at that point, there were only 8 types. A lot of people don't realize this as well, that Jung only had 8 psychological types, and Myers made 16, which I do agree with more. And I guess at some point there was 32, and they went back down to 16. You can watch like OPS, objective personality, there's 32 there. But things are convoluted enough, so I don't know if I agree with that. And she talks a lot about, she definitely has a she boner for the ox function, the parent function, and Jung believed it was relatively unconscious. And, as time progressed, a lot of people will vehemently disagree that anything that Jung or Myers didn't say isn't true when it regards to typology, but we got to look at extrapolation here, folks. I mean, we're not looking at Newtonian physics anymore. They definitely built and expanded on that. I think if we were there, we would be still stuck. So, I'm not saying I'm a scholar and believe me or anything like that, but I definitely have my own opinions, of course. But yeah, you could look like John Beebe and Linda Behrens and Stephen Montgomery and Kiersey. They all expanded on their theory. So definitely keep an open mind there. But we all see like OPS has the jumpers and there's the loop, the NIFI loop, and whatever type you may be has their own loop. So not every type is dependent on the auxiliary function. I think that could be leading to a lot of the mistyping that is MBTI and MBTI related tests. And the questions there are very leading. And it's like, what do you do at a party? Do you drink and party, or do you kind of stand in a corner and talk to a few friends? Or if you know enough about MBTI and you want to believe you're an INFJ, you can test as an INFJ pretty easily, even with a practitioner there. And we go to chapter 3 here. And also I do want to mention the winner for next month's book club, which hopefully be a little more organized, is The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel von der Kolk, who's an INFJ. It is a little bit longer, so I might break it up into 2 months. And I definitely want to make a presentation. I left the link down below for the Amazon link to buy the book. It is on sale right now for the paperback for like $11 and some change. So I think that's a good deal. It's 424 or 464 pages, where this is like 313. So it's quite a bit longer. Chapter 3 is loaded with charts and statistics. I can't definitely go over them all. But I will go over some. So she was looking at like high school prepping for college, like ACT scores, SAT scores, and things like that. And ESTJs dominated that. And let's keep in mind too, the statistics were done like from I think the 40s onto like the 70s. So they're pretty old and outdated. And it's not surprising that ESTJs tested higher there because the system is basically built for them. But the national merit finalists for people who qualify for this have an IQ of at least 110 and only have 1 C letter grade within 2 years. We're INTJ followed by INTP. She does talk a little bit about IQ tests and their fallacies. And I don't remember exactly what chapter in this. I was reviewing my notes and I didn't see it. I think it's later on. That intuitives usually test higher in IQ tests. And I believe that there are many types of intelligence, and that's definitely a book I want to dig into. I can't remember the name of it right now. Anyways, yeah, ESTJs tested higher there. INTPs and INTJs scored higher on, I guess, the gifted students, whatever you want to call it. And she did a study on the Philadelphia Girls High School at the time, and ENFPs actually led for girls, followed by INFPs for highest with that. And the outliers for almost all the charts, usually intuitive scored higher on a lot of the things, but ISTJs were kind of the outlier for there, and ISFJs for females. So it definitely seems like there are more thinkers for males and more feelers for females. So maybe there's something to that. And STJs dominated finance and NTs dominated science. That's not a surprise, even though science kind of got enamored like psychology has, unfortunately, by censors. Like, basically you got to show me it's true and there has to be physical evidence. So there's a lot less imagination involved, unfortunately, now. An interesting thing that I did see that NTs were most likely to go into law. I don't think that's true anymore. And SCJs were almost tied there, I guess. Again, old statistics. And, I think a lot of these were taken before the civil rights movement and civil rights lawyers. So a lot of NF types, the idealists, are civil rights lawyers and things like that. I'd be interesting to see current statistics on this, but I don't put a lot of merit in studies and statistics. Anyways, chapter 4. This is extroversion versus introversion. I think these next few chapters are pretty cut and dry. And she said that extroversion starts with the outer situation. Introverts start further back with inner ideas and mental concepts derived from Jung calls the archetypes. Introvert pause to get deeper understandings, where extroverts take action, rarely consider ideas, which I think is a good way to look at it. I know a lot of things, challenges, like when you interview introverts, they tend to pause more. But yeah, I do it myself. I have to kind of think things through, where extroverts basically just jump into it. And she also said in the polls back then that extroverts outnumbered introverts 3-1. I hear differing things now, and the statistics are all over the place and mistyping and all that stuff. So I hear that introverts actually dominate extroverts these days, but who knows what the actual figures are. Myers points out that the world is dominated by extroversion, the Western world at least, and I have to fully agree there. I guess it even was back then. Outliers like Dale Carnegie, who was actually an introvert as a child and basically got an introvert shamed and made win friends and influence people to make introverts more extroverted, which I think we do need a balance, of course, but extroverts do need to kind of chill out and self-reflect and find themselves. And I think a good book on this that I might actually include later on in these book clubs if they are successful and people do find interest, Quiet by Susan Cain. It basically talks about introverts and their powers. I think it's a good book for introverts to read and for extroverts to understand introverts. So we'll definitely look into that as well. And I just interviewed Joe from Ghosts of Jung. So if you'd ever want to check that out, do so. And he said in one of his videos that extroverts like to think out loud. And I think that kind of triggers introverts. I remember when I was with the ESFJ guy at work, and he just kind of kept asking questions and talking to himself, wondering questions like, what the fuck are you talking about? What are you doing? And it kind of got on my nerves. But definitely consider that we're all different. And I think this book points out a lot of our differences. And it is worth a read if you haven't read it yet. So definitely pick it up. And Myers also gives an example of an ENFP. And she doesn't know if something's good unless somebody tells her so. So I guess in her book that ENFPs or extroverts need feedback, but I don't think that's true. I think INTJs definitely need feedback. So yeah, I think TE users kind of need more feedback as well rather than empathy. And you can't really blame Isabel Myers for this, but I don't think things were fleshed out. And maybe she just had more of a general view on it, but this is basically typology 101, basically. Jung was like very convoluted and hard to read, and she simplified it, which is good, but I think it's oversimplified. Myers also points out that she thinks extroverts they consider them do. This again, it wasn't fleshed out again. If you look at Linda Barron's interaction styles, there are the progression types, which INTJs are. They just want progression for progression's sake, and they kind of do things by trial and error, and they're the control types who try to flesh out everything and get everything right the first time, and they really don't take action until they feel comfortable doing so. I think there's a big misperception that INTJs are control types, and this is how we get stuck in analysis paralysis. Things have to be perfect in our mind. If they're not perfect, we are too afraid to take action with our SC inferior. And there's also the TI cynics down in the shadow where we kind of don't think we're smart enough, or we could think that we're smarter than everybody else. It's kind of weird how we think that we're the smartest people in the room, but we're also the stupidest people at the same time. INTJs can be kind of interesting in that way. And INFJs kind of do it similar with their FE, FI. Chapter 5, S versus N. That sensors, it's a very frustrating thing for intuitives with sensors. That sensors just need things that are right there in front of them. They use their 5 senses, and if they can't perceive it with their 5 senses, it isn't real. And intuitives are more imaginative, future-oriented, thinking about possibilities and what ifs. Chapter 6 is thinking versus feeling. Thinkers, like I was talking about how Jung wanted to, he's definitely a thinker in my book, an INTP, and he wanted to use typology to help unhealthy people kind of individuate and fix the world problems. And T kind of will, in an unhealthy sense, neglect people and social structures. F will put people first and do what's right. Isabel Myers wanted to make her typing system the MBTI for social harmony, and I guess basically for shits and giggles, so people can know each other in a healthy sense. Chapter 7 was judging versus perceiving, which she did talk a lot about here, which I'm not a big fan of. Nothing stood out here for me. If it did, go ahead and chime in if anybody's watching. And again, the one important thing she does talk about in this chapter is that everything here is a preference, and Linda Barron's does hit home on this as well. So INTJs are J according to her. It's a preference that we organize our outside world, and if we're jumpers or if we're immature or if we're looping or stressed out, we may not do that. So we're naturally perceiving things, kind of like I just have to force myself to do this even though I'm choking right now. But hey, I'm doing it. And so chapter 6 is thinking versus feeling. We'll go on to chapter 7, J versus P. I guess I'm backtracking here. Nothing stood out really here. Again, we'll just talk about balance here. I think balance is an important thing. I can't imagine. I think this might be due to our SE inferior, and we don't want to give people bad experiences, INTJs and perhaps INFJs. I can't speak so much for them. But we're very, structured and organized, and we want to be on time. We hate being late and things like that. So we definitely don't want to give people a bad experience showing up 15 minutes late to a doctor's appointment or a meeting or to work or anything like that, unless we don't care about it or whatever, of course. But I think that mostly stems from our SE inferior, basically, we just want to give a bad experience. We're very self-conscious about that. But yeah, naturally we're perceivers. And I think, again, like, I think she's just very broad here. Like, what are we perceiving with our NI, basically? We want information. We're perceiving information, right? So we definitely don't like to do things unless we feel comfortable doing it, really. But we kind of have to force ourselves to do it. And I think if we kind of do the whole control thing like an INTP would, where they take their sweet ass time with everything, which is great because they're very thorough and they can kind of fact check us and kind of keep us in line. But, you know, an INTP and INTJ team, I think, is a pretty good tag team there, because INTJs are doers. We get out there and do things, and we make mistakes. And INTPs can kind of correct those mistakes. Definitely give us ideation with their NE. So, and I think it depends on which function we are using. Like I said, you know, we're not always using our NI. We're not always using our TE. A lot of times our SE inferior gets in the way. It's very convoluted and very complex. It's not as simple as MBTI puts it. There's a lot more to 4 letters to it. So basically, like, the I functions versus the E functions. So I'll start off with TE and TI. She says that TI is fed from subjective and unconscious roots. Basically, she thinks these come from Jungian archetypes, which is interesting because I always wonder how TI DOMs experience the world compared to NI. I think they're very similar in a lot of ways, but I think NI stems more from archetypes. We kind of see the internal patterns of how the collective conscious unfolds, but she definitely disagrees here and says TI is from that. Maybe they're just different outlets from the archetypes. So if you're a TI Dom and you want to leave a comment, let me know. I'd love to pick your brain. FI versus FE. Basically, FI, if you don't know, is our internal value system. It's our being, basically our individualism. I think INTJs kind of have their FI is very overlooked, and FE is about, you know, the collective group and collaboration of all that, the value system of a whole. SE versus SI. I think there was some interesting things here because I definitely don't understand SI as well. For extroverted people, the extroverted functions always focus on the outer world, outer objects, and SE is about outer objects and experience, where SI is more about the internal impression released by the object. So like SI users, they get very comfortable with things, and they have like their favorite foods that comfort them. So they seek things, where FI just kind of just like things. I think that's just a way to look at it differently. And SC sees things in reality and concrete. SI looks for more of a meaning or significance, traditions, and things like that. So that's where that comes from, where INTJs lack. So it's almost foreign to me. They see value in traditions. SI users, the pattern here that E functions look at things at more of a surface level, and I functions look things deeper. So we're all introverts and extroverts in varying different ways. Oh, hi, Persona Bell. How you doing? Nice for you to join. Appreciate it. If you have any questions for me, I don't know if you've read Gifts Differing, definitely put it there in the comments there. I'm kind of doing this solo, I guess. I appreciate you joining. Go ahead and go to chapter 9, the different types. She reminds us again that when she's typing introvert, she looks at the auxiliary function, the first extroverted function in the stack. Introverts are naturally more deep. Definitely just, and again, she talks about the importance of the auxiliary function, but I think we see from evidence today that a lot of people don't use their auxiliary function, or they prefer not to use their auxiliary function. We, of course, use all 8 functions, in my opinion, in varying levels. So let me know in the comments how you use your auxiliary function. And she says that one of the things that I guess can lead to mistyping in her system is if people aren't using their auxiliary function. So that's important. An example she gives is an ISFJ here, an ISFJ male, who's kind of emotionally unavailable, and if they're not using their feeling function, they might get mistyped as an ISTJ, for example. And this is due to certain things here. Of course, there's males in Western society are very discouraged of being emotional. Women will kind of say that they want their men to be emotional, but when they do, they get accused of being feminine. So I don't know, but there definitely are emotional men out there, and there's nothing wrong with that, and we do need to get in touch with our emotional side, so I'm not discouraging that. And she's also not looking at the shadow functions here, like ISFJs, like INFJs. I don't think to a lesser degree, because they're more accepted and less rare, or whatever you want to call it. But they have their FI cynics. FI cynics basically feel terrible about themselves if they don't feel like they're valuable enough to society. So an ISFJ male is probably more prone to ignoring that than an ISFJ female. So yeah, they can be mistyped as a thinker, basically. Something, probably the most interesting thing in this book, and this is to the critics of the John Beebe's 8-function model or any 8-function model, and I'm going to quote her here. It is well to understand the shadow, as it explains some curious contradictions in people. If a person's apparent preferences indicate a given type, yet he or she has behaved in a way wholly alien to the type in question, consider the quality of the act. If it was inferior to the person's usual standard, it may have been a shadow at work. So she does admit here that there's a shadow, and Jung talked about the shadow. And if you're unhealthy, you're in a bad mood, you're hungry. Like if you take the MBTI test 1 minute and you take it the next day, you might test something different. I see something with younger people, especially like on Reddit and stuff. Like, oh, I tested as ISFJ, then I tested as INFJ. Then I tested as INTJ. You might have just been hungry and answered the questions a little bit differently. So again, I don't know what the experience of an MBTI practitioner is. If you've been typed by an MBTI practitioner, please let me know. And then she talks about breaking down the types. Basically, she talks about ESTJs and ENTJs have an urge to make decisions and will make faulty decisions in a strange field, which I definitely agree with. If they're out of their area of expertise, they still have that urge to be in charge because they are an in charge type, according to Linda Behrens. And they will always want to be right, even if they're wrong. Sometimes, unhealthy ones, of course. And they're probably the least likely to give perception a chance. I mean, they are true judgers, I think, by nature. If any of the types, they use their TE like madmen and mad women, basically, and they just judge, and one thing to another. So it's an interesting dynamic there. Again, it's about balance. They need to use their P functions, of course. Oh yeah, I got to bring this up because I have another quote from Myers that was cut off. She kind of compares INTJs and INFJs. Quoting, thinking and feeling judgment is vitally necessary. An introverted intuitive must develop it for themselves because their utter conviction of their intuition's validity makes them impervious to the influence of outside judgment. The importance to introverted intuitives of cultivating a judging process is a balance and support their intuition cannot be over-empathized. Again, I think she's summing up here that INJs are natural perceivers, and if we don't develop our auxiliary function, we're kind of screwed, and we get in the NIFI and ITI loop. So yeah, I know I'm hitting that point along, but that's the biggest criticism I have towards the MBTI. Yeah, sorry, Arlinda, my lack of SI, I put the wrong date there. I apologize, I put the wrong date. Thank you for joining, though. If you have any questions, I know you did read Gifts Differing, so thank you for your support, and I'm sorry for putting the wrong date. My bad. All right. Next page here. And also another point I want to make about the last quote that we made, FE and TE trickster, we can be very gullible until we kind of develop our inner bullshit detector, and I'm referring to INTJs and INFJs here. I remember when I was young, I would believe anything, basically. I don't have that FE to kind of see what people's intentions are, really, I think. And just being abused and neglected and manipulated by people over and over, that stimulates any opposing personality to be very, very distrustful of people. So I think that's something that she pretty much mentions there with the shadow and the NI DOMs there, just something Next one, if you haven't read yet, The Body Keeps the Score was the winner. It was 5-3. None of the other, and second came in Neuroscience of Personality by Dario Nardi. So we'll be reviewing that next month. I forgot the date, but it's down in the live stream. Chapter 10 is talking about the use of opposites and dichotomies, basically. And she did, again, I agree. She talks about balances, and you need to kind of work on your weaknesses and balance everything out. She talks about E types and F types are more likely to be able to express themselves and use tact to kind of get what they want. I guess in other ways of being manipulative. I think manipulative is kind of a neutral term there. I agree with C.S. Joseph there. And she also talks about you need to develop your weaknesses to get what you want. I think INTJs and maybe INFJs, I don't know if you have any insight on this persona bell. We just don't really talk to people, and we kind of have to manipulate systems to get what we want. And it's an interesting way we go about it, I guess. We kind of just ignore the whole people things unless we can kind of know that we can manipulate them. Not in a bad way necessarily, but I guess a lot of times in a bad way. Then she talks about thinkers and feelers, how thinkers need feeling to get what they want, to kind of sell themselves basically. I am very horrible at self-promotion there. Comment here about Persona Bell. I think our minds are outside of society systems. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. So T needs to think about more what they say and use more tact. I noticed like yesterday I was with a patient. I think she was an ISFP. I don't know. It's kind of hard to type people on the fly at work. I work at a behavioral health hospital, and she was definitely, intellectually stunted in a way. Not that I'm saying ISFPs are dumb by any means, but she's in a mental hospital. She's there for reasons. She just kept asking for things over and over and over again. And one of the other people that worked there looked up a number for her, and I just got a little frustrated with her, and I basically told her what the tech told her, that she couldn't find the number that she was looking for, but she found the number to the headquarters. So I just used my TE basically, kind of steamroll and solve the problem pragmatically, and she just didn't appreciate that, I guess. I could have took the time and felt out what her needs were, and she does have special needs again because intellectually challenged. I think she's schizophrenic or something like that. But yeah, I wasn't trying to be rude, but I came off as rude. So I agree there. Thinkers definitely could use feeling more. And feelers need to use thinking more to make tough decisions and to analyze a concept or an idea. Basically, like a big example here that she uses, like thinkers have less of a problem firing or disciplining somebody in a work setting, where feelers would have more of an issue for that. I think I never had to fire anybody, but that would be kind of tough unless they just totally had it coming. But yeah, again, balance. Yeah, she was very sensitive. We did talk about it later on, and we gave our sides of the story, and I ended up helping her with her clothing issue that she had. So yeah, I kind of swallowed my pride, and she swallowed hers. So I think that's definitely very good for both of us there. She also talks about here, which I don't agree with, that feelers kind of ramble on and they need to keep it short and concise. I think feelers have more of a tendency to kind of beat around the bush and not express themselves directly. But going back to Linda Barron's interaction styles, there's direct communication style and there's the informative communication style. Like an ENTP male or an INTP male might just go on and on and on, kind of beat around the bush, where I don't really think this is a thinking thing. I think it's more of an interaction style thing where it's direct versus informative. Like an ENFJ, they can be very direct, actually, and they'll tell you exactly how they think or feel, especially with their TI inferior. You look at like Neil deGrasse Tyson, the dude always has to be right. I enjoy the dude. He's a very entertaining guy, but he always has to be right. Myers claims that thinkers feel things need to be short and sweet, but again, ENTPs, there's nothing short and sweet about them. I love ENTPs and everything, but they're all over the place. And the next chapter, or the next section, I should say, is about intuition versus sensing. And she talks about how sensors get frustrated with intuitives because, and I was just responding to an ESTP on Reddit, how he gets pissed off at NIDOMS that has a questionnaire sent him off. It's hard to emote with a third slot FI. She agrees. She's typing something, so I'll come back to that. Yeah, an ESTP was venting on Reddit that he gets pissed off at NIDOMS because we don't like experiences and that we're in our own world and we will shut out things that is not in our vision, and it's very frustrating to him. I responded. I don't think I got a response from him yet, but I kind of gave our side of the story that INTJs, I don't know if INFJs feel this way, but we need to, I don't know if it's a TE thing, maybe it's an FE thing too, but we kind of ration our social energy. So like if I go to work, I heard Joyce talking about this on her channel, Joyce Ming, when she was talking to a bunch of female INTJs, that we need to pause basically and kind of organize our energy as needed. Like I know when I go to work, it can be hectic for the first few hours. So I'll sit in my car for 5-10 minutes and I'll just kind of think, okay, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. I kind of plan out what I'm going to do with my social energy. So, and what Persona Bell says, selective about SE exposure. Yes, we are very selective about it because we could kind of see SE DOMs, and this is what I responded, as very impulsive, very reckless, and that we do need to expend our energy. Enough on that, I suppose. And she didn't talk about J versus P much here. She definitely chimed in a lot throughout the book. And next we go on to marriage and type, which is interesting, I think. And again, this is old, so I think people are more progressive these days, less emphasis on marriage. I don't think marriage is a good idea in most situations. I think it's just something monotheistic religions, basically, and it's a system control that the government uses now. So, but if you want to get married, go for it. And Prasanna Bell, before I move on, yeah, I definitely need to manage my energy in relation to social interactions. And anyways, she talks about compatibility and contrast of types. And interesting enough, she talks about IT males pick extroverted women. I think that makes sense because we're kind of shy, I guess you could say, or very insecure about talking to people. We don't want to look like big goofs, which we usually come off of because we're really awkward with our FE trickster and SE inferior and all that. And most of my major relationships, which I talk about quite a bit on this channel, I had an ESTP ex-wife and an ESFP ex-girlfriend who I had a son with. So I thought that was a very interesting correlation there. And she said the highest likeliness was sensors getting with intuitives, which I find really interesting. I think that's the biggest barrier to break with the dichotomies. I mean, it's very hard for me to talk to sensors on a very deep empathetic level, I think, because our needs are different. Their needs are, I think, Prasanna Bell, we were talking about this in the comments of one of your videos, that sensors basically, and I could be wrong here, so correct me, sensors have more basic needs where intuitives kind of have more complex needs. And Prasanna Bell comments, I think that extroverts often initiate relationships with introverts. Yes, there's all those memes online that extroverts adopt introverts and stuff like that. So maybe it's true. I haven't had that in a long time. When I was younger, it was more so, but as I get older, I think people have less empathy for you. And I think a big conception out there is like if you're 40 and you haven't changed your behavior by 40, you're a lost cause, basically, and people kind of forget about you. I don't know, 40 is a hard number, but chapter 12, she talks about how babies and children learn at an early age. And this is what I was talking about at the beginning of the live stream, if you didn't catch it. That she sees that words are basically symbols and intuitives pick up on symbols. And children, I don't know if this is true. I haven't put a lot of thought into this, having a lot of exposure to this, but children basically learn off words and we learn a little bit quicker growing up and we pick up on things and we speak earlier. But I hear a lot of like gifted students and people, and most people who are coined to be autistic or intuitive, especially I think in IDOMs. So I thought that was very interesting and that we pick up on words. And it kind of seems off topic and it doesn't really fit here. So I won't talk a lot about that, but if anybody has any questions on that. And Cinemoc in the Discord server says, always room for growth, even after 40. I think INTJs are very into lifelong learning, which I do agree. We are the type to, I think that's when we start flourishing, really, is probably middle age. For most of us, I guess there's not a lot of trauma-based, I guess according to Joyce Mead there is, but there's the assertive versus turbulent dichotomy, which better than nothing, I guess, but it definitely needs to be more looked into and fleshed out. I think a lot of maybe assertive INTJs kind of have it easier earlier in life, or maybe they're just arrogant pricks where they think they're better than everybody, and yeah, that's it too. But yeah. A quote from Jung, I'm going to paraphrase it here because I can't remember quotes to save my fucking life. Life starts at 40. Everything up till then is research. So I'll be 38 in 2 weeks from today. So I guess I'll be finding that out soon. Another comment from Prasanna Bell. I think that when your FI or TI is lower down the stack, identifying personal needs can be more challenging. Yeah, I think so too, possibly. I don't know if you can elaborate on that a little bit more. I think we're least likely, I don't know about TI, but with my FI, I'm definitely least likely to express my needs. Especially with my situation growing up, my needs were made very clear by my family that they're not important. So that could be a case-by-case basis too. Or sorry, Cinemoc or Prasanna Bell. We could kind of give more emphasis on that. I appreciate it. And 13 goes into learning styles. Chapter opens up a quote from a teacher. One of my greatest frustrations of teaching, remarked a teacher in a discussion about type, is that you're always robbing Peter to pay Paul. You design something to reach one group of students, knowing that in doing so, you are going to turn off another group. It is sort of comfortable to find a way there's perfectly understandable explanation. And I think these days with teachers, a big frustration I had with talking to teachers from the 90s on, I don't know exactly when it was implemented, is it's called No Child Left Behind. I like to call it No SJ Child Left Behind. Basically, It's a curriculum that teachers can't deviate from. And please, if there's any teachers out there, correct me if I'm wrong, that they have a very strict curriculum and it's catered to SJs, especially STJs, namely. I talk about this a lot, like ADHD and stuff, and this does break my heart. And again, if you have ADHD, I'm not discrediting you. I do think it's a real thing. I think it's just vastly overdiagnosed. Get things going types: ESTPs, ENTPs, ENFPs, ESFPs, and ENFJs, or ESFJs, excuse me, are get things going types, and they have a hard time focusing on finishing things. I think because they don't really flourish in a system where they can't sit in a classroom and read a book for 6 hours at a time. They are deemed ADHD and they're given these horrible drugs, which are beneficial in some cases. It's a case-by-case basis, but again, it's a case-by-case basis, not a one-size-fits-all thing. And I definitely can envision a world where curriculum is divided by types, and one type will learn a certain way and another type will learn a different way. And, we'll kind of integrate ourselves. Like INTJs will go with ESTPs, or ENFJs will go with ISFJs, and we'll kind of learn to interact with each other and learn from each other. I don't know. Just my way of seeing things. I think things can definitely be broke down in curriculums and studied more. It'd be more costly, but I think if you look in the future, it'd be beneficial. Education is important, but we're learning algebra instead of business math. We're not learning to balance our checkbook or budget and learn about investing. We're learning what the fuck X is. I don't really get why we're learning algebra. Again, I talk to people in my adult life. I've never really used algebra. There are certain professions that use it, but save that for college. If you want to go and learn algebra for a profession, that's what college is for, I think. All right, and on Discord, Cinemock totally agrees with you, Persona Bell, so there we go. I kind of went off on a tangent there. No child left behind. And she continues to regurgitate the emphasis in the last chapter that N learns from words and he translates for meaning and symbols. So maybe that's a part of the collective unconscious too. Find it fascinating that bears use curse words, or just certain words that we deem as bad words and they're forbidden to say. Maybe that's an SI thing, I don't know. And this is interesting too. She is not talking about how trauma can lead to learning disabilities, which is something, again, this is something in the 60s and 70s, 80s, where we weren't as trauma informed. And people tend to blame emotional issues or low IQ with sensor kids that have never learned from sound symbols. I think that we can see that trauma stunts growth and can give up learning disorders, kind of like ADHD. I don't think it's exactly a learning disorder. It's a developmental disorder. If I'm wrong, so correct me if I'm wrong. Definitely something I'm interested in, neurosequential model of therapeutics by Dr. Bruce Perry, which is a book I might include in the book club one day. It's not for the faint of heart. It talks about children that he worked with. He's a psychiatrist and a neurologist, and just how trauma stunts their brain growth. And I actually had an NMT assessment, which if I can get my hands on, I might share at some point. It basically talks about how trauma stunts brain growth, different parts of the brain, and how certain therapeutic interventions can basically correct that. So it's a very interesting process. All right, chapter 4, type and occupation. I think this is one of the last chapters here. Looks at careers, and intuitives look for careers where they can be creative and think of possibilities. I think intuitives are definitely more limited, and intuitive careers require a lot more education. And again, I'm talking about how the education system is catered for STJs. So intuitives, we're a minority there, an unspoken minority. So, and I'm not trying to make this a giant pity party for us. But yeah, creativity is frowned upon. Even Einstein said that imagination is more important than intelligence and creative. Your creativity is just intelligence at play. Where, again, this is very vague. Sensors like things that are concrete and here and there, but an ESTJ occupation would vary from an ESTP. And of course, feelers like working with people, and sensors like jobs revolving around facts. And Persona Bell, I want to go back to her. Okay, this makes sense. I think that for me, my focus is directed primarily towards others, and so figuring out my needs has taken second place. Again, that's just what I said about feelers, kind of prior towards working with people. And again, she comments, but I agree that upbringing will influence how much attention is focused on identifying personal needs. Very true. And Myers, I think one thing that the MBTI did was introduce in a corporate world and people misconstrued it. And she did say here herself that she discourages that if you're a certain type that you should be discouraged from taking a certain job. And it should never be used on hiring or HR basis, like an INFP can't be an accountant or something like that, or an INFJ because they lack TE can't be an accountant. I think if you're an INFJ and you want to be an accountant, which I don't see them wanting to be an accountant, but I'm sure there's someone out there that's an INFJ accountant, and she agrees, and that her system was definitely misconstrued and people were pigeonholed. And imagine if you're typed wrong during your initial orientation and you're mistyped and they try to pigeonhole you in a position that was just totally wrong for you. Not cool at all. Type development, chapter 15. She claims that I and E show early in life, which I kind of disagree. Let's go back to Persona Bell real quick. I remember it used to be used for recruitment, but they stopped using it for years now. Yeah, I think that MBTI, they took Myers' vision and misconstrued it. She was very adamant about not pigeonholing people into occupations, and I think they just made a shitload of money on that after she died, unfortunately, and luckily they've taken that out of jobs. Yep, I agree. Cinemac, it is a good thing. She says that INE shows early in life, but I disagree. I'm pretty sure my son is going to be an ESFP, possibly an ESTP. Earlier in life, up until about 3, he definitely seemed more introverted. And I know kids don't always start playing with others until about 3, but he was very, very independent. He would not let me or anybody else help solve a problem. He would want to solve it himself. He got mad if I helped him or his mom helped him. He would be very satisfied sitting there just playing with his cars and trucks by himself. But after about 4, he started becoming this little social butterfly. His little brother's almost 4 now. He'll be 4 in 3 months, and I'm thinking he's going to be an INFP. But he's starting to be more social too. And I was told when I was a baby, I was definitely more talkative and more lively. And C.S. Joseph, he has a theory, which I don't know how much merit I put into it, that we reflect our subconscious, our duality type until we're about 3 or 4. Then we start getting into our ego. Could be true. I don't know. So I acted more like an ESFP when I was younger, and maybe my son acted more like an INTJ when he was younger, because we definitely have that independent streak. And chapter 16 is about type development. So basically, we talk about SI DOMs not having enough intuition. They kind of put their foot in their mouth with their NI and don't think about the future. And NI DOMs, NI heroes don't really have enough SE that we use. And kind of don't live in the present moment and we lose out. Persona Bell, I think more study is needed in this area. It is very interesting. Yes, I did read a book, or more of a book. I couldn't finish it. It's called Galen's Prophecy. I forgot the author's name. It was one of the sources for Susan Cain's book, Quiet. He basically goes off like the phlegmatic and the Korlach. I don't know a whole lot about it. Galen basically was a Stoic philosopher and a Greek physician who typed people basically by bodily fluids. It's a very old, archaic system. Child psychology, developmental psychology. I would definitely like to talk to people who are more into that for sure. Here's a quote from her. People cannot hear intuition if their senses are dinning in their ears. When listening to N for people cannot get information from their senses. So again, this is like an INTJ or an FJ. They're in their heads thinking about their vision with their NI, and they're kind of ignoring the present world. And hedonistic SE DOMs, or not even really hedonistic necessarily. They're so involved in the present world, they're not thinking about the future. But that's why I do things like judo. And I don't think this is necessarily true, because judo, one of the ways I flourish is that I pick up on patterns of people. Oh yeah says, yo, how you doing? Oh yeah, thank you for joining here. Appreciate it. If you have any questions, just put them in the chat below. But yeah, I definitely use judo to exercise my SE and my TE. Again, I don't think we use one function at a time. It's like playing a chord on a guitar. We use several functions, and we either make a beautiful note or it sounds like shit. And judo is a very good example of that. But yeah, I kind of just pick up on the patterns and I see how the moves flow together. It's very much like a very complicated game of human chess. I think it's something that INTJs and perhaps even INFJs could enjoy. So I think it's one of the more, can't think of the word, complex martial arts out there. So I definitely think it's probably more like Go, actually. You are very friendly. Thank you for the reaction. This is a book reading, a book club of Gifts Differing by Isabel Myers. So we're almost done here. I'm on one of the last chapters. So I don't know if you read it or not. Feel free to put any questions or comments in the chat. Yeah, and like if I'm in this place where there's like a lot of loud noise or a big crowd, my NI is drowned out and I get very uncomfortable very quick. So any NI DOMs, if you have that similar sensation when in a loud crowded areas, please let me know. Chapter 17, nothing really stuck out to me here. It basically, she just talks about let people be who they're going to be and who they want to be and not pigeonhole them on type. So yeah, definitely take type as a philosophy, not a manual life. Basically, like if you're an INTJ and you want to be a firefighter, like I had a female INTJ firefighter on here one time. And NI-DOMs can't be first responders. I'm a first responder in a strong sense. I did save a guy from hanging himself about a month ago, so that was pretty intense in a behavioral health hospital. It was pretty intense, and I was on my toes and alert with my SE, and I saved the guy's life. It definitely was a team effort. Something I meant to talk about in one of my videos, but I don't think I did. But it was definitely a team effort, and the guy lived, so thankfully for that. But I did find him, and I'm not taking all the credit for them. It was definitely the nurses stepped in and intervened and gave him oxygen and everything he needed. And we called the ambulance and got him to the hospital. Oh yeah, says, oh, I understand that you have many live streams. When is the next live stream? I haven't had any interviews lately coming up, so I don't know if there's going to be a podcast where I interview somebody. But the live stream for the next book for next month is The Body Keeps the Score. I'm going to keep it. So September 4th at 4 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. I'm going to try to keep this book club consistent the first Sunday at 4 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Yeah, it's pretty deep and pretty, and people were very, very traumatized from it. And people were very panicky when we found the patient hanging. But I think that's where thinkers come in. We can just kind of keep a cool head. A lot of the nurses there were psych nurses for decades, and they were just having a shit fit. So, but they definitely need to be there for compassion, people, but thinkers need to be in that situation to react. All right. Chapter 18 is motivation for type development in children. Important lesson here is allowing kids to earn satisfaction and not spoiling kids. Yeah, I think that's very important. I try not to spoil my son. Like I said, when he was younger, he was very, very adamant about doing things himself and learning, solve problems himself. Now he's more than happy to let me do everything for him, but I'm like, nope. You're going to do this. You're going to learn. He doesn't like it, but I think it's important to raise kids to be independent, even if they are an interdependent type. I think I definitely put my INTJ values there for him. Chapter 19 is the last chapter, and this was written well after the rest of the book was written, Myers says. And going on from wherever you are, she just gives advice for developing skills. And I write a lot of notes on this. Sensing, looking for practical applications, avoid wishful thinking. Like, I think intuitives have a problem with that. We have wishful thinking, and we always don't go out there and get what we need because of our inferior function or our shadow functions. All right, everybody. Thank you for joining. I really appreciate Persona Bell and Cinnamon Lock for their interaction. Yeah, if you have any questions or comments that we didn't get over, I'm going to edit this video and probably re-release it because there's a lot of stammering. September 4th at 4 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, we are going to go over The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel von der Kolk. He's an INFJ. I'll have more preparation, more experience, so I think these will progressively get better. Thank you for attending, and I don't know if there is an audiobook for Gifts Differing on YouTube. I'm guessing there isn't. Thank you for going beyond clickbait, and have a great day.